Right.
10th of February, Rabbi Furst, Parsha Shavua Yisro.
All right. Good morning. Thank you, learning again. This is Rabbi Stone First. Here, Shiva Samanavshi here in Yerushalayim, care of Zoom. Parsha Shavua Yisro, as Lou mentioned, Shana Tavshin Pegim. Okay. I think I'd like to work on the what's commonly known as the Aseres Dibros. Parsha Yisro, we have Matan Torah, Aseres Dibros. So if you want to start, let's begin. That's in the chapter Chav, and we'll start right at the beginning. Right at the beginning there. Pasuk Aleph. So it's chapter Chav, Pasuk Aleph. There for you.
Chav. Pasuk Aleph. Vaydaber Elokim Eis Kol Hadvarim Ha'ela Lemor. So God spoke all these words, saying.
Now take a look at Rashi here.
God spoke. The divine name Elohim used here means judge exclusively. Why is this term implying judgment used to introduce this section of the Torah? Similarly, it is said, you shall not curse Elohim. And the Targum Onkelos renders it judge, because there are passages in the Torah that contain commandments, for which one receives reward if he performs them, but if he does not receive punishment because of them. One might think that the Ten Commandments are also like this. To teach us otherwise, the Torah states, excuse me, and God spoke using the name Elohim, which indicates that he is a judge to exact punishment for failure to keep the Ten Commandments. I'm a little confused by what I just read. It seems to say that he doesn't punish and he does punish.
There are those mitzvahs. Since there are certain mitzvahs in the Torah, exactly which one I'm not sure right now, but since there are certain Torahs in the Torah that if a person doesn't do them, he doesn't necessarily get punished for not doing them. Okay, right? You might think that the Aseres Dibros are also in that category. There might be some of these mitzvahs in the Aseres Dibros might be of the kind of mitzvahs that if you don't do them, you don't get punished. For example, let's say tzitzis. We know that tzitzis is not a mitzvah chiyuvis, it's a mitzvah kiyumis, meaning if you happen to have a garment of four corners, then you're obligated to put the tzitzis on them, and if you want to wear that garment, but you're not mechuyev to, number one, wear a four-garment garment. You're not obligated anywhere that you must wear a four-garment garment, and therefore there's no obligation, a positive, forceful obligation to wear tzitzis. Okay.
Right.
Nevertheless, so if a person's not going to do it, right, there is no punishment that he receives for not doing it. For another mitzvah, let's say tzedakah, right? Person comes and wants to give you, he's asking you for money, and you don't give him. You don't give him. Is a person punished according to the Torah for that? Not exactly so. There's no prescribed punishment for not doing that. Now, a bittul asay, if a person has an asay to do, let's say he's mechuyev to put on tefillin. He's also mechuyev to give tzedakah, right? A certain amount that according to the rules and regulations. But he's mechuyev. So the question is, if he's not going to do these things, if a person is mevatel mitzvah asay, So he has to bring a korban for that. It's an aver, it's a sin, but there may not be any specific punishment. Now with tzitzis, the Gemara does cite an instance where Eli Hanavi came to one of the Tanoim, and he asked him, "Why aren't you wearing tzitzis?" Right? So he said he didn't have a garment of 4 corners. Right? So he was criticized by Eli Hanavi that he would be held accountable if it was a time of danger. If it's a time of danger, a person can be held accountable. And this the Mishnah Berurah brings the halacha in the Hilchos Tzitzis, that if a person does not fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis, even though he's not obligated to, and there's no direct punishment according to the Torah for not wearing the tzitzis, but nevertheless, if there is a time of sakana, danger, right, he's risking not having the sufficient merits, zechusim, to withstand the kitrug, the accusations that take place at a time of danger. Right, so there are ramifications for not doing a mitzvah aseh, right? But nevertheless, prescribed punishments, right? They are not. So here Rashi's explaining that this expression that used "V'yidaber Elokim," that's called a devar me'ela lemor. The lashon Elokim meaning judge, midas hadin, the characteristic of HaKadosh Baruch Hu as being a judge, right? That implies here that we shouldn't think that these mitzvahs are like those other mitzvahs that there's no punishment for. No, there will be punishments for these mitzvahs. Is that better now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so
Let's continue with the Rashi. Has another part to explain here as well.
okay, so he says all these words. This teaches us that the Holy One, blessed is He, said all of the 10 Commandments in one utterance, something which is impossible for man to say in like manner. If so, why does the Torah go on to say, I am Hashem your God, and there shall not be unto you gods of others? Because he went back and specified each and every statement of the 10 Commandments individually. Okay. What I don't see what one has to do with the others. He said them all as together.
It's called a devar me'ela. All these things, called a devar me'ela. Malamish HaKadosh Baruch Hu says there was b'dibur echad.
So what does that have to do with whether or not you have other gods?
No. The first Rashi is explaining the statement. Why does it have to mention Anochi Hashem Elokecha She'el? Call of the questions. Call the devar me'ela. He's meaning Hashem spoke all these things out in one utterance, and then they were repeated again, right? Separately, distinctly, right? So, and that's what the Anochi is talking about, right? That was when it specifies what exactly was said, right? Then we now see how the one utterance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was broken up into these various different 10 statements.
We've also got here in my sefer that to say this expression teaches us that they answered. Let's see, in Israel answered to that which required the reply. Yea or yes, Anochi, and to that which required the reply, nay, lo, yeah, by nay, mek, don't know what that means.
I think it's explaining that since they were all spoken out at once, number one, and number two is that the reply that meaning we have our affirmation, right? Our affirmation of all these statements took place individually, meaning we couldn't both say yes and no, right, at the same time, even though so HaKadosh Baruch Hu uttered all these 10 things initially as one group together. Then they were now repeated, specifying each one individually, and that after the I gave us the opportunity to apply positively or negatively in terms of what the particular mitzvah was.
It put yes and no on the table as tools for us.
Yeah, we were now allowed to say yes and no. If it was just one statement altogether, there was no opportunity for us to respond. What we couldn't respond positively or negatively, yes or no, because it's all one statement and containing various different things which had positive things to be said or negative and no about them. But now that we delineated each one individually, now we had the opportunity to say the yes or no, our affirmation, in a positive way or in a negative way.
Okay, Lamor, to say, this teaches us that the Israelites would answer yes to that which was positive and no to that which was negative.
Okay. That's good.
That's
Okay,
that's the end of Rashi's comment on verse 1.
right. So let's continue. If that's more or less clear, let's continue on.
Okay. Anochi Hashem Elokecha Asher Hotzeicha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibeis avadim. I am Hashem your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of slaves. Rashi says, who took you out of the land of Egypt. Taking you out of Egypt is sufficient reason for you to be subject to me. Alternatively, God identifies himself through the Exodus because he revealed himself at the parting of the sea as a mighty warrior. And he revealed himself here as an old man full of mercy, which as it says, and beneath his feet there was that which had the form of the brick of sapphire. This brick was before him at the time of the enslavement as a sign of God's suffering along with the Israelites in bondage. And something like the image of the heavens was before him once they were redeemed. Since I change appearances, do not err and say that there are two divine powers. Although I have appeared differently to you since then, I am the one who took you out of Egypt, and I am the one whom you saw on the sea. Alternatively, God identifies himself through the Exodus, because the Israelites heard many sounds at the time of the revelation of Mount Sinai. As it says, the sounds coming from the four directions, and from the heavens and from the earth. Therefore, do not err and say that there are many divine powers. Why did he say the commandments in the second? Okay, so that's the end of that thought. Okay. So, it's phrase that he took us out of the land of Egypt is to clarify that there's only one God.
Right. That's a reference because Baruch Hu being the power that took us out of Mitzrayim. It's the same one God. Exactly.
Why did he say the commandments in the second person singular, such as your God, rather than saying them in the second person plural? Elokechem. That's the question. The answer is so as to provide for an opening for Moshe to offer a defense for the Israelites regarding the incident of the golden calf. And that is why Moshe said in their defense, why, Hashem, does your anger burn against your people? You did not give the command, there shall not be other gods for you to them, but rather to me alone. From the house of slaves. Okay, so wait a second now. So what's this point?
Yeah, how do we understand this?
Yeah, so Hashem only said to Moshe that isn't it pashut in the opening statements of the Aseret Dibrot that Hashem is that you cannot serve other gods?
Right. So that's the point here. So again, Rashi's asking the question, Lama Lashon Yachid Elokecha, right? Meaning speaking, Kilo it's speaking to Moshe, right? The God of Moshe, so to speak, right?
Oh,
And not including the rest of Klal Yisrael.
I see.
And it said, Elokechem, your God, plural, meaning including all of the Jewish people at Har Sinai. So there'd be no excuse that Moshe could have used at the time of the Chet Egel.
But we don't see Moshe saying that. We see him saying the other nations are going to say that you weren't powerful enough. He doesn't say you didn't command the Jewish people not to have other gods.
Well, it could be Rashi's mentioning more than what we just find in the Psukim. It could be Moshe Rabbeinu. I mean, don't forget, Moshe Rabbeinu was there for 40 days and 40 nights praying on behalf of Klal Yisrael, right?
Right.
So he must have used a lot of arguments to defend Klal Yisrael.
Right, but nevertheless, it seems that the one that worked was about the other nations, not the technical loophole that you commanded me, not them. That wasn't the one that worked. The one that worked was the one that said the other nations are going to get the wrong idea and it'll be a Chilul Hashem.
Right, that was the most effective one.
Yeah.
Which teaches us a big lesson.
Right.
That when you want to influence a person, right, you have to appeal to him in things which are most relevant to himself or herself. So Chilul Hashem, the Chilul Hashem that would have developed if HaKadosh Baruch Hu made a decree against Klal Yisrael, so that was so to speak, the most relevant reason to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though all the other ones were also true, right? But that was the one that really did it.
Right. So this one is not necessary.
Well, I'm not sure if the claim, the defense of the, because see, the claim of the Chilul Hashem is not a defense of Klal Yisrael, right? That in no way is defending Klal Yisrael.
Right.
That's something which is relevant exclusively to Kadosh Baruch Hu. In addition to the defense that had to be made for Klal Yisrael, you had to defend Klal Yisrael. It would have been a Chillul Hashem the other way. If it would be no excuse, no good excuse for Klal Yisrael, it would be a Chillul Hashem the other way. Skilo Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't care about his own laws. That would also be a Chillul Hashem. Right. So you need those reasons as well. It's not the Chillul Hashem that the claim of Chillul Hashem is really most relevant to Kadosh Baruch Hu in his covenant, his honor, right? But Chillul Hashem, the Kadosh Baruch Hu doesn't defend his own rules, doesn't defend his own laws, doesn't uphold his own laws, would also be a Chillul Hashem. So you needed to have some defense of Klal Yisrael as well. It would each one of them I don't think could have stood on their own. You did a combination.
I see.
That's the way I see it. But a good point.
All right, so Rashi goes on from the house of slaves, from the house of Paro to whom you were slaves. Or is the verse rather saying from the house belonging to slaves, implying that the Israelites were slaves to slaves rather than slaves to Paro? Clarify this, the Torah says, and he redeemed you from the house of slaves, from the hand of Paro, the king of Egypt. You must say now, on the basis of that verse, that they were slaves to the king and not slaves of slaves.
Yeah, that's an important point, which we should remember. The Jewish people weren't simply slaves to any old body in Mitzrayim. We were the imperial slaves. We were royal slaves directly to Pharaoh himself.
But Yosef, when he went down to Egypt, he was a slave of Potiphar.
Right, that's true.
So he was a slave of a slave.
Right. But the rest of the Jewish people didn't come into that situation. I'm not sure. I don't know when apparently I was arguing with somebody a few weeks about it, so we didn't get a clarity on it. When Yosef received this position from Pharaoh, did that was he freed from being a slave, or did he remain a slave? I don't know. I never got a real
Anybody in the service of Paro was reckoned to be a slave, as I understood it. No matter what his position, he had to do what Paro told him to do, and anything that he did had to be done with regards to the benefit to Paro himself.
Right. I agree. I agree with you. But the question was he doing that because Paro was the king, or because Paro happened to be his master?
Makes no difference.
Well, no. The difference would be Ephraim and Menashe. He had children. He had these children after he received this position. If you own a slave and he has children, those children of the slave belong to you, the master, right? So the question is, are Ephraim and Menashe, were they free people, or were they slaves?
I don't know. They were slaves. I don't know.
I'm not. I didn't get a clarity on it. I'm not sure myself.
What did the person you were talking about it with say? What was his stance?
He thought they were, he was a free person. He thought it was a free person, but it wasn't clear to me when exactly Joseph received his freedom, if he in fact ever received his freedom.
Hmm.
Well, my presumption was that when he went into jail, he became a slave of the head of the jail. That the slavery of Potiphar transferred to the jail. I think it says something to that effect in the Torah, if I remember correctly. It says something.
But he'd still be a slave to Paro anyway.
Well, he was a slave of a slave at that point. He was a slave to Paro. I mean, the head of the jail was a slave to Paro, and
Right.
was a
Yeah.
slave to him. But so what I was getting at is that when he was freed from the prison by Paro, my presumption was that he was freed from being a slave to the prison.
Mm-hmm.
So now the question is he a slave to Paro, or by promoting him, did Paro free him also from being a slave to Paro? That's what I don't know.
Right. So that's not clear. So now when he received his position, Paro gave him a wife, right? Paro said, "Here, this is your wife."
Right,
That's usually you usually do that to a slave. You say, "This is your wife now," right?
right,
Like her or not.
right.
Mm.
Good point.
So that made me wonder a bit. Let me just 1 second.
There's a difference between our relationship to Moshe Rabbeinu and the Egyptians' relationship to Paro. Both of them are leaders, although Moshe Rabbeinu was not a leader, a king, but still he was the main person, like Paro's the main person. And we're not slaves to Moshe Rabbeinu, but we were slaves to Paro.
Right.
And I think anybody who set foot on Egyptian soil would automatically become a slave to Paro. Probably even travelers and merchants.
There were laws like that.
Beg your pardon?
There were laws like that in history.
Uh-huh.
There were certain locations, societies. If a stranger came into their society, they immediately became a slave.
Mm.
Now they talk in the Torah about taskmasters. So I think we have a similar uncertainty. You could view the taskmaster as being the slave who is also the slave master. Or you could view the taskmaster as simply being an employee of Paro, and therefore we're not his slaves.
Yeah, I agree. That's right.
And it's not clear.
1 second.
But the high officials would be paid as well. They have a salary. Does a slave have a salary? No.
No, in general, not.
Well, how do you know that the taskmasters were paid?
That would be a.
I don't think it says that anywhere.
That wouldn't. It's not relevant.
Well, it's relevant to what we're asking.
Mm. Well, it wasn't thought that we'd be asking that question.
But it's a very important question because Noah's curse of Canaan says you'll be a slave of slaves.
Mm.
So that principle is an important principle.
Mhm.
Right. Mem pay. Mem pay.
Well, you probably have to define what is a slave in Egyptian terms as against anything else, any other place. And if a slave is somebody who's subject to the immediate commands of Paro, regardless of what ever else he was doing, that would and whoever else he was, that's one thing. But if a slave is somebody who's in Paro's court and has no life of his own, you can't put a step anywhere without permission, then that's a different thing. I mean, you could be a slave outside of the court, in that you subject to Paro's demands, whims, and yet sort of carry on your own business.
Right.
Well, you made me realize just now, Roy.
Beg your pardon?
You made me realize with your comment about the issue of relevancy. We could ask the question on Rashi. Rashi, why are you telling me this? Why are you telling me that that they were not slaves of slaves? Who cares?
Right. That's a good point.
I think that that would sort of show how demeaning, how low down the slave of a slave is. The slave is one step higher than the slave of the slave, or many steps higher.
Oh, okay. First of all, about Yosef, whether he was freed or not, Baruch Hashem. There's a sefer written by it's called Mashivas Nafesh. It was written by the Yochanan Luria, born in France in 1440. I mean, he lived 600 years ago. So he says there, he's asking the question that what was the point of Paro giving Asnas Bat Potiphara to Yosef? Why did Paro want to give? Because she was that was wasn't a she was a daughter of a respected family, right? So
Right.
He says, based on what Rashi's dealing with in that pasuk over there, that Rashi's coming to answer a question and say that Paro was having the kavanah to honor Yosef, Shemeforsin the Rabbim Yosef Cheres. He wanted to make clear that Yosef was no longer considered to be a slave. That's Meforish. That he was given someone to marry who was coming from a respected family, because a respected family would not want their daughter to be married to a slave. So here, by giving this woman who's coming from a respected family to Yosef, that was making it a public announcement, so to speak, that Yosef was now no longer considered to be a slave.
But his treatment of, what's her name?
Asna.
What?
Asnas Bati Potiphar.
All right. Anyway, so she was she's been treated like a slave herself. by being told to marry Yosef. And Yosef was told to marry her, regardless of her position. They weren't free to not marry. Is that true?
Well, don't forget, Pharaoh was still the king, right?
Yeah.
You didn't want to go against if the king gives you a wife to marry, you better think twice before you say no.
Right. So, since you haven't got your own will, whatever the constraints happen to be working on you, that means that you're subject to his what do you call it? His whims. You marry
Right.
her, she should marry you, and that's that.
Right, but that may not be any worse than any other subject of the kingdom.
Right, which means, as I said before, they're all regarded as slaves of Pharaoh. He may not have wanted to bother with them and let them go their own merry way, but if he wanted to bother with them, they had no choice.
Yeah. Well, okay, so that's that's a good point. But when in the good old days when they had kings, right? They were all considered subjects of the king. But does that really mean they were considered to be slaves of the king?
Who are you talking about? Which civilization?
Oh, I don't know. I guess it would change from place to place, time to time, I guess.
See, there's a difference between a Pharaoh and a king.
Right.
A Pharaoh takes possession of everything, lock, stock, and barrel. He's a dictator. And a king takes care of the country. The people that are in it are subject to him, but are not exclusively subject to him. They've got their freedom of coming and going. They've got their freedom of marrying whom they wish or not, of being who they want to be, worshipping who you want to worship or what you want to worship, whatever. But a slave hasn't got this freedom. The king hasn't got the freedom of,
We lost him.
Well, just
Power here in the yeshiva, everything went dark.
That's what we thought. We thought you had a power failure.
Yeah, did you see it go black, or it just was?
No,
You
you
just-
didn't go black. You just disappeared.
Yeah, that's what happened. Baruch Hashem, I've been here the whole time, but not with you.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to call and tell me you had a power failure.
Yeah, I was gonna get ready to call, but things, and then it was had to everything had to reset itself. Okay, here we are back again. All right, okay, so we've established that at least from one of the Meforshim here that Yosef, in fact, was set free. So that means his children, Ephraim and Manasseh, were also free. Now, when the Klal Yisrael became avadim, when became slaves, right? So it's said, I think the Psukim say we were slaves to Pharaoh, meaning, and they're medayek with that expression that we were slaves to Pharaoh, meaning we were, as they say, royal slaves. We were governmental slaves, right? We weren't like sold on the slave market that just anybody with a little extra money could come along and buy us. We were official governmental slaves, which was I don't know if that was advantageous or not. That's think about that. What the nafkamina, what the practical difference is, whether we were private slaves or governmental slaves. But that's another question we don't have time to deal with right now. But getting to this Rashi, so what is Rashi? Why is Rashi dealing with this here? What is that relevant to us of Mibeis Avidim, Mibeis Paro, Shayavodim Lo, right? Because it says Mibeis Avidim. So I mean, Rashi's explaining that we were okay, so we were fine. But Beis Avadim doesn't necessarily mean that we were slaves to Paro.
What difference does it make?
That's part of the question. Exactly. Yeah. What meaning? Why does that make a difference at this point? Okay, when we were in Mitzrayim, when we were slaves, so it made a difference to who we were slaves to, private slaves or governmental slaves. But now, meaning, why make a point of that right now in the Aseret Dibros? It could be. Go ahead, Roy.
What's Beis Avadim?
So Rashi says basically, that was the house of slavery, literally the house of slavery. So Rashi says that means bias Paro. That was from the slavery of Paro.
Does it mean his actual court, his actual palace, is where he lives, or does it mean the whole land?
I think it means the whole situation there.
When we say a based in the house of justice,
Right.
we're the phrase a base house is not talking about who owns it. It's talking about the institution of justice.
Right.
I assume that this is the same thing. It's the institution of slavery. We were freed from the institution of slavery.
The Beis Avadim, yeah. It comes together with, it's mentioned at the same time as of Mitzrayim, Beis Avadim. And they sort of put those two together.
I think so, yeah. Which goes along with what you said, Rabbi, that we were slaves to Paro. We were government slaves. We were institutional slaves.
And they make a point about that. Unfortunately, I forgot which ones, that it was important for the type of slavery we experienced, that we were institutional governmental slaves, meaning if we were individual slaves to individual Egyptians, so one could wake up one morning and decide to free us, if it was possible to do, right? But since we were governmental slaves, we were like governmental property, right? It wasn't possible that anybody could come along and just free his own trade, even if he's renting from the government, so to speak.
Right.
So that could be the relevance of mentioning it over here in the Aseret Dibros. It's bringing back the memory, the situation, how desperate it was. If you're a slave to an individual, so you can try and get on his good side. You can try and get money and bribe him to let you free. But if you're governmental slaves, there's no hope that you can ever get free unless the government makes a decree of freedom on you.
Mm. If the Beis Avadim literally means the confines of Paro's residence, then once you're outside the walls, you may not be classed as a slave. You'd be free. So, but you'd still be in the land of Egypt. So it must be the whole of the land.
Right. And basically,
Yeah, Hashem took us out. He didn't take 3 million people out from Paro's palace. There weren't that many in there. He took us out from the land itself,
Right.
as well. So Beis Avadim must mean the whole land of Egypt.
Right. Right. Okay, very good. Let's continue on.
Okay, so let's see, where are we? Oh, the wind.
Let's,
We're on 3, Pasuk 3.
okay, yeah.
Lo yiyeh lecha Elokim acherim al panai. There shall not be unto you the gods of others before me. Okay, Rashi says, Lo yiyeh lecha. Why was this said? Rashi asks, why was this said? Because it is said in the following verse, you shall not make for yourself a graven image, from which I can only conclude that one should not make an idol. What is the source for saying that one should not keep an idol that has already been made? The Torah says, there shall not be unto you, i.e., it is not only is it forbidden to make an idol, you must not keep one either. Okay, so this is a completely new point.
Right. Even if it doesn't belong to you, you can't keep an idol. Right.
Right. Yeah, we were once given a gift. We had some foreign students who rented a room in our house, and they were from I don't remember now. I think maybe China or Japan.
Borneo?
Pardon?
Borneo?
Borneo?
Borneo.
Oh, Borneo.
Roy knows where Borneo is, right?
No, they weren't from Borneo for sure. Anyway, they gave us this a bar, and on top of it were a bunch of figurines.
Right.
And it was very pretty. And but when we looked at the instruction, there was a little pamphlet that came with it. It said, this figurine is the god of such and such, and this is the god of such and such, and so on. So we didn't know what to do. So we went to our rabbi and said, "What is this? Is this Avodah Zarah?" Because generally, people give gifts like this. They're not intending it to be Avodah Zarah. It's just like a pretty tchotchke that you put on your mantelpiece. But he said no. He said this is mamish Avodah Zarah. You got to get rid of it. You can't you can't do anything with it. You got to just put it in the trash.
You're in a bad way.
What?
You're in a bad way.
Well, I did what the rabbi said, so I guess I
Maybe you're coughing and all that.
Oh yeah. I'm very sick. I'm
Really?
recovering, but I've been sick now for 10 days. I thought I maybe had COVID again. I took a test and I'm negative. I don't have COVID.
You've been drinking a lot. You should be drinking a lot, I think.
Uh,
Lemon and water.
well, I cut out all the liquor, but
Yeah.
I've
That
been
was a mistake.
drinking water. Yeah, hopefully I'll get an extra rest on Shabbos and I'll be recovered.
All right.
For business.
Shalema.
Thank you. Thank you.
It must be very uncomfortable.
Yeah, I haven't been sleeping well either. So I wake up frequently, tossing and turning. All right.
Very good. That brings us about to the end of our time. Okay, so that's good. So you were Makayim this mitzvah there with the getting rid of the Avodah Zarah. Very good. Not even to have it.
Yeah, it was very interesting to learn that halacha, because I was pretty new at the time. We were my wife and I are both Bali Tshuva, and when we were married, we were definitely beginners. And this was only a couple years after that, so we were still learning a lot of things.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem.
as we are all still doing.
Yes, we certainly have a lot to learn. All of us have a lot to learn, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Very good. All right, so Roy, you should have a good Shabbos, and Lou
Thank
also,
you.
of course, Lame, a good Shabbos, and hope to see you
Well,
Yom Rishon. I'm trying to work on something to send out for, we'll start, I think, Megillas Esther on Yom Rishon, Bli Neder.
Great.
mhm.
So I'm going to try and work out something. We'll try and combine. We did it last year. I think we combined it a little with Pirkei Avos as well. Be a good little chazor of the Pirkei Avos.
Yeah, that was quite good.
Yeah, we're going to try that again. We'll see. We can try and work that out. Question would be is, I think what I'm gonna you probably both all have your own Megillas Esther's, right?
Yes.
Right. So I think I'm going to do is send out a a standard Pirkei Avos because a lot of the Pirkei Avos they have different numbering systems. You know, different Mishnayos. 13 is really 14 or 12 in another one. So maybe I'll send you a standard for our purposes, a standard Pirkei Avos, and then we can learn the pasuk in Megillas Esther, and then we can refer to certain Pirkei Avos which have a trying to make it a little bit of a correlation between the statements of Chazal and Pirkei Avos and the lessons that we
Right.
see from the Psukim in Megillas Esther. So I'm going to work on that, Be'ez Hashem.
Patient.
Well, you should have Hatzlacha Rava, Rabbi.
Amen. Be'ez Hashem. Hopefully I'll send that out, if not today, Motzei Shabbos, so Yom Rishon, we'll see what we can do. Okay.
Right. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you,
Good
Bill.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Bye-bye.
Amen. Likewise, you too. Thank you, Ron. Thank you.